A horrific mass shooting at the First Baptist Church in Sutherland Springs, Texas. And of course, also a few days ago, the Islamic terrorist attack in New York City. God in heaven, have mercy on us. Let's talk about self-defense. I'm Randall Terry. This is Voice of Resistance. May God have mercy and God give strength and comfort to all of the victims and their families of this horrific mass murder in church by this man. The face that we will all now have to remember as a mass murderer who took the lives, as of this moment, of 26 people that we know of, and more are expected to not live as at the time of this taping. I am going to use our time together to come at this from a completely different angle. You and I can turn to any number of cable news networks. We can go online and we can get the details. Thank God for the hero who was next door, who was not even in the church, who shot this mass murderer and made sure that he did not escape and did not kill any other people. I ask you to ponder the words that I'm going to share with you. For those of you who are pastors, for those of you who are elders, deacons, priests, people on the boards of churches, I'm asking you to weigh my words and to pray and to consider what I'm going to share with you. No one in that church that we know of had the ability to stop this man. Now, maybe the details will come out. But it is my conviction, and I'm asking you to please just hear me out. It is my conviction that we need to return to one of the ancient principles that was practiced in the early church. My wife and I used to be members of the Charismatic Episcopal Church. For those of you who are regulars, you know that I never talk about denominations on this program, but I'm only telling you that because our bishop, Bishop Craig Bates, is and was a brilliant man, a great historian, a great theologian, an incredible pastor, counselor. Just, if the church was full of leaders like him, it would be a much better time in church history. But he taught us, and he said, do you understand why the deacon had in the clerical garb, why the deacon had the robe, the sash that went across sideways? That's where they would put the sword, because deacons were charged, among other things, with the physical bodily protection of their bishop or of the priests and pastors that they were serving. At points in church history, deacons were armed. They were armed because the church knew that there were vagabonds, villains, killers that might try to take the life of a bishop or a priest. And so the deacon was armed to protect. Is it possible that each of our churches needs to consider making sure that there is always at least one trained and armed person in every church service? Is it possible? Is it at least something that we should be discussing? I believe that it is. We have a relative who, for a living, trains people in churches, deacons, ushers, how to carry and use firearms in case of an emergency in a church. That's what he does. Not long ago, my wife went to our church, spoke to the pastor, one of the people on the board, private meeting, and said, we could be the target of an Islamic terrorist attack on any given moment. What would you men do? What would this church do if a Muslim terrorist walked in? Or a terrorist like this man, Kelly. He was not a Muslim, just an atheist God-hater. What would you do if someone walked in and started shooting parishioners, people in the congregation? I'll tell you what happened. Don't go away. I'll be right back. May God have mercy on those poor people. I'll be right back. Today, many so-called Christian intellectuals believe that the God of evolution used billions of years of death and destruction to evolve the bodies of the first human beings. Then, they simply declare the theory of evolution as fact to justify their unproven scientific fallacies. By the grace of God, more and more Catholics are rejecting this modern-day mythology in favor of the traditional doctrine of creation, as recorded by the Bible, and believed and taught by all the fathers and doctors of the Church. To find out how sound theology and natural science confirm the sacred history of Genesis, visit the Colby Center for the Study of Creation, and be sure to check out our bookstore, which has titles like I Have Spoken to You from Heaven, A Catholic Defense of Creation in 6 Days, and A Catholic Assessment of Evolutionary Theory. That's the Colby Center for the Study of Creation. Welcome back to the program, friend. I am sorry, truly sorry, that we live in a time that has become so violent in this country, and that we must discuss these things. We must. The Bible says that the wise man sees danger and prepares for it. That's what the proverb says. The wise man sees danger and prepares for it. The fool passes on and suffers. So my wife sat down. This was all her, by the way. You might be saying, well, Randall, why didn't you go sit down? My wife came to me and said, I'm going to talk to our pastor. And my wife is a very strong and a very godly and a very independent woman. And I said, go, bare your heart and tell him. So she went to them and said, look, do you have anyone trained here to look for packages? Do you have anyone trained here to look for people that look like they might be a gunman? Do you have anyone who's trained here to do profiling, to know for clues? Of course, the answer was no. Well, after a couple of long meetings, the decision was made that somebody would be in every single service on a Sunday, every Sunday service. Somebody would be armed inside of the church. Not where you could see it, but someone who was trained. It was either somebody who was retired police, off-duty police, former military, or somebody who had adequate and appropriate arms training, all right, and knew how to use their firearm, and they were going to be in the building in case something like this happened. The reason I brought up the deacon is because this is not new. The reason I brought up the sash that was where they either held the sword or hid the sword was because there have been times throughout church history where it was necessary to be able to protect ourselves. And I'm telling you something else. This is a very interesting point of church history. Did you know that the Greeks were occupied by, the nation of Greece was occupied by Muslims for 300 years? And I believe it was 1822, where at the monastery of Osius Lucas, a Greek bishop holding up what is now the Greek flag, a white flag with a blue cross on it, and they launched the revolution against the Muslims. It was a 7-year horrific war in which the Greeks freed themselves from the military oppression and the sexual slavery and the rape and the murder and the theft of the theft of their children, the kidnapping of their little boys. You want to read you want to read about Islamic oppression and Christian suffering, read that history of the Muslim occupation of Greece. So it was from inside of a monastery that this revolution was launched. My point is that at different times in history, the church militant, those of us here on earth, we had to be a little bit more militant than some of us might be used to. And right now, in America, I believe it is time to start having a calm but deliberate discussion in each of our local churches. I don't care what your denomination is. I don't care. I don't care if you're a Mormon temple, all right? It's a heretical building. I don't care. Buildings aren't heretical. There are people that are gathered on a Sunday, on a Saturday night, on a Wednesday night prayer meeting, who can become a target, can be sitting ducks. I'll tell you a story. There was a church in South Africa, 1,100 people. I want to say it was St. Bartholomew, but I can't remember for sure. It was an Episcopalian or an Anglican church. And on a Sunday morning, 2 Islamic terrorists walked in and started emptying their firearms. There was one man in the building who had a revolver. I believe it was a 5-shot. And he started to return fire. And he hit one of the Muslim terrorists and they both fled. 21 people were killed. But the number could have been 300 or 400 or 500 because they had fully automatic weapons and hundreds of rounds of arms, of bullets. Him being there with a pistol. And it wasn't part of the plan. He was just there with his pistol. And he saved hundreds of lives. And then look at what happened in this poor Texas community. I'll be right back. I want to finish telling the story about my wife meeting and give some conclusions. Plus, we'll talk a little bit about New York. Don't go away. Have Muslim terrorists hijacked the peaceful religion of Islam? Or is there more to the story? The answer lies in the life of one man, Muhammad, the founder of Islam. Muslim terrorists see themselves inside a 1,400-year-old story, a narrative that focuses on specific events in the life of Muhammad. We are going to look at Muhammad's life using their most sacred literature. We will look at Muhammad at the Battle of Badr. We'll see him deal with those who mock him. We'll see the times when he used deception. We'll witness Muhammad's anti-Semitism. And yes, we will discuss Muhammad and his teachings concerning sex, slavery, and jihad. Friend, if you want to understand Islamic terrorism, get this series today. During the break, one of the ushers from our church came in to say hi, and I'm not kidding, and he's one of the men who carries. Every service that he's in, he's carrying a loaded weapon in his pocket in order to defend the people of that church should a murderer come in with intent to kill. So after my wife met with the pastor and various people and started talking to people like this usher, the men of the church basically put together an ad hoc agreement where they were looking for people who would commit to come, former police, current police, former military, people trained in firearms, in order to make sure that there was at least one person in the building that was armed. And we know that when we are in a church service, we know that there is at least one person there, always carrying a firearm. And I have a sneaking suspicion that there are more. So I decided I was going to discuss this today because, of course, immediately in the aftermath of this horrific shooting, we have people coming forward and saying we need to have more gun control. You know what the Israelis did when they started having terrorist attacks? This is going back decades now. They immediately made sure that every single school teacher in every single school is trained in weapons use and is carrying a gun. So they don't have Sandy Hooks because they're not at the mercy of a 911 call and however long it takes for police to get there while a murderer is killing people. They made sure that all of their pilots on their commercial jets were carrying a firearm to keep a terrorist from hijacking the plane. There's even some situations where their personnel at the desk in an airport, just people there, are armed. Why is this so hard for us to figure out? Now, I'm going to point out the obvious, all right? Please forgive me. And I mean that. If this is disturbing to you, forgive me. Do you know how many guns there are in America right now? Do you have any idea? The best estimates that we can come up with are between 400 and 600 million guns. All right, that's 2 guns for every person, basically. We are the most heavily armed people in the history of the world. There are 252 million firearms that have been registered through the ATF, or somehow or another the purchase was monitored, logged by the ATF, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms. There's no chance ever that this country is going to be disarmed. It's not going to happen. So then you have to step back and say, okay, what are we going to do? I mean, in other words, what are our options? When there's 600 million guns on the street right now, what are our options? Just logically. Are we going to take away guns? No, that's not going to happen. Are we going to keep law-abiding citizens from owning guns? Let's say that we did that, where we just stopped the sale of all guns. Then what? Well, there's still 600 million out there. What are you going to do with them? People are going to buy them, sell them, trade them with each other. They're not going away. And then what if you made it a crime for people who were law-abiding citizens to buy and sell with each other? Then what? Do you think that gang members and Muslim terrorists and lunatics like this man who just murdered all these people in Texas in a church, you think that they're not going to buy a gun because it's against the law? They're already intent on committing murder. So the guns aren't going to go away, and there's nothing that anybody in authority can do to keep criminals from getting their hands on guns. It's just not going to happen. So therefore, let's revert back to the words of George Washington. George Washington said that an armed society is a polite society. If everyone knows that everyone is carrying a weapon, well, then it actually suppresses the urge to pull it out. Because if that man knew that there were 3 or 4 deacons in that church when he walked in that could take him out, he might not have gone in. And if he had gone in, he might have been dead after he shot 1 or 2 rounds, or maybe he would have been shot in the head by somebody the moment he brandished his weapon. I mean, this is common sense, friends. I've got to take another break. I'll be right back. Please don't be offended. We've got to think about this. We've got to have this discussion, because these types of murderous attacks cannot continue to happen without our ability to defend ourselves. I'll be right back. What Would Mohammed Do? Islamic Terrorism Explained is the best movie series documentary ever produced on the life of Muhammad and Islam. How do I know? Because it's what critics are saying. John Moore, radio host and author, said, "I learned more from What Would Mohammed Do about Islam and Islamic terrorism than I've learned from everything I ever read and watched in my entire life." Best-selling author Dr. Bill Warner said, What Would Muhammad Do is the best movie series, TV production on the life of Muhammad and Islamic terrorism that has ever been produced. Friends, this is what the experts are saying. No one has ever done what we've done. I encourage you to get 1, 2, 4 copies. Call 304-289-3700. That's 304-289-3700, or order it at the address or the website that you see on the screen. Friend, we have a series that will help you and those you love to have an impact on this country. It's called Insurrecta Nex. That's Latin for revolution against the killing of innocent people. This is the history, the philosophy, and the theology of social revolution in America. We look at the Stamp Act, the Boston Tea Party, the abolition of slavery, the abolition of child labor, women's voting rights, the civil rights movement. All of them have this in common: courage, sacrifice, dedication, and in-your-face tactics and rhetoric. That's one of the reasons that we've been losing the culture wars the last 40 years, is because the bad guys are using these tactics and we aren't. We will send you this 14-part TV series along with these manuals for students, a teacher's facilitator guide for only $40. Go to 304-289-3700, 304-289-3700. Welcome back, friend. We're just not going to get rid of guns in our society. We're not. And so we have to step back and look. And by the way, for those of you who are Bible-believing Christians, did you know if you look in the scriptures that being disarmed was a part of God's judgment, or a part of God, or a part of enemies oppressing the people of Israel? When Jonathan and his dad Saul, during the days of David, when they fought the Philistines, the Bible says that the only 2 men that had swords were Jonathan and Saul, because the Philistines had disarmed them. And they actually required that the Jews go to the Philistines to sharpen their plows and their farming implements. That was a way that they could ensure that they could oppress the Jews. The Jews were not able to defend themselves. They disarmed them, and then they actually took away the ability of the Jews to make weaponry. We don't want to be that people. So I weary of the hypocrisy of the media elite and the anti-gun elite who have armed guards. You know, if you listen to some of these people from Hollywood lecture us while their whole idolatrous temple is collapsing around them, when you listen to them lecture us about, you know, those Republican gun-toting people, like the people that were massacred in Nevada, they have armed guards that travel with them. Okay, their hypocrisy is disgusting. The Hillary Clinton hypocrisy is disgusting. These are evil people, friends. They're evil. Hillary has Secret Service men around her that she will have for the rest of her life that are armed and trained. That's their mission is to keep her from getting killed with the use of their firearms when necessary. So for her to blather that the rest of us can't enjoy the same protection, or at least a half of a chance, is disgusting. It's beyond hypocritical. It's demonic. It's tyrannical. It's vile. So when we see these horrific attacks, Nevada, New York City, the terrorist attack that just happened, we have to not listen to the siren song. We have to ignore them, devoutly ignore them. But beyond that, we have to get right in their faces in whatever venue that we can. Right? Letters to the editor, call-in talk shows, blogs, conversations around the water cooler at work, conversations in church. You men who are watching this, you ladies who practice shooting a weapon, you've got a firearm, you need to just start talking, with or without your pastor's permission, about having a firearm in church. Because if the pastor says, no, I don't want a gun here, and then a terrorist or a murderer like this man comes into your church and you save the day, they're going to be really happy that you did. Okay? Your right to defend yourself with equal force is a God-given right. And it's only tyrants and people who reject God's rules and laws that want to keep you from exercising your God-given right of self-defense. I've got to go. I'm sorry to have to talk about this, but we need to talk about it.